Hello, everyone. Welcome to Global Express. I'm Neena Gopal. This is where we discuss developments in our backyard, our neighborhood that impact India. Today, we examine the Chabahar challenge, which looms large over India after Delhi reached an agreement with Tehran on managing Iran's strategic port of Chabahar for 10 years. The US, immediately and somewhat to India's surprise, has held out a threat of sanctions. What have we walked into? The Middle East is a ticking time bomb, a powder keg. The conflict between Iran and its proxies and Israel on the other side has already sucked in Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan and Egypt, not to mention US allies Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. So, is this really the right moment for such a deal? Is it a strategic and economic coup, as both Delhi and Tehran are making it out to be? What was the main driving force that sealed the deal? Who wanted it more, Delhi or Tehran? Or is it really no more than a quid pro quo? So, India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar made a critical visit to Tehran in January 2024. Top of his agenda was securing the safety of shipping lanes. India was concerned over the safety of Indian ships plying the Red Sea and the Gulf after an Indian ship was attacked. And Jaishankar, meeting the Iranian Minister for Port Development, won a promise from Tehran that Indian ships will not be attacked by their proxies, the Yemen based Houthis who prowl the Bab al Mandab. But in return, India had to offer something. And making good on its promise to develop and operate Iran's strategic Chabahar port by replacing the annual renewal arrangement to run and operate the Shahid Baheshti terminal into a 10-year agreement with Indian Ports Global Limited seemed the ideal reciprocal gesture. And here we are. Within 6 months, an agreement has been signed. So my question is basically the one that's gnawing away at me, is that given the current instability in the Middle East, will India be able to use the port to its advantage and work with Iran and Russia to build its own version of China's Belt and Road, the international north-south transport corridor to Central Asia and Eurasia, as the idea of IMEC literally crumbles in the dust before it's even taken any form or shape? And given the United States saber rattling on sanctions on countries that do business with Iran, will we be allowed to? Talking to us today are three eminent experts in Iran and Chabahar. Vice Admiral Shekhar Sinha, who retired from the Navy after 4 decades, a fighter pilot who has flown extensively from 4 aircraft carriers, commanded 4 warships, was chief of the Integrated Defense Staff and commander-in-chief of the Western Naval Command. Associated with a number of think tanks, he's a strategic analyst and commentator. Welcome, Admiral. We also have hard-nosed journalist and commentator Sanjay Kapoor, who's the editor of Hard News and a foreign policy analyst who focuses in India and its neighborhood in West Asia and has visited Chabahar, I believe. Welcome, Mr. Kapoor. We also have Mr. Sameer Bhasin, an independent analyst and entrepreneur who spent years in Afghanistan building special bonds with the political class within Afghanistan and now the Taliban. He also has a special interest in Chabahar that he visited, scouted its business potential, and is also part of several think tanks. Welcome, Mr. Bhasin. My first question, on which I'm sure all three of you would like to comment, has India made the right decision in going ahead with this 10-year agreement on the Shahid Beheshti terminal in Chabahar with Iran? It's not a small commitment. So if you could take us through what it entails, Mr. Kapoor, and have we done the right thing, or are we coming late to the party?
Thank you for inviting me to this discussion. I'm so happy with the friends who are there on the panel. It was wonderful to listen to them. But my view is that Chabahar agreement, it's been there for some years. In 2016, it was the first initial. It should have gathered more momentum than it has done. Primarily because India was always looking over its shoulder to figure out how the US was going to react. In 2018, the US gave a waiver from any sanctions because at that time, it was a different reality. You had Afghanistan led by Ashraf Ghani, and it was totally controlled by the Americans. Now we have a situation where Afghanistan is not the same as it was in 2016, 18, and thereafter. And it doesn't require the kind of reconstruction that the US imagined. And it thought it would happen through India, when it was imperative for New Delhi to sidestep Pakistan, because Pakistan was resisting any kind of movement towards Afghanistan. It didn't allow any buses or cargo travel to those parts. So taking place this juncture, I think interested, and that is why they're talking in sanctions. One thing that may not find support from other countries maybe the fact that why did India choose to sign the agreement now when the elections are taking place? They could have waited their turn,
Exactly.
allowed it to happen with the new government to come in place. And on more importantly, why did the government of United States of America threaten us with sanctions? Do they
Yes.
expect India to have a change in government, or do they expect to deal with another government? So these are questions that are, coming to my mind as we start a discussion. But it is a very, very tricky thing, primarily because it squares off with another connectivity corridor that India is a signatory to, that's the IMAC, India Middle East
Exactly.
European corridor. And that is what is supposed to challenge whatever North-South corridor is trying to do with India and Iran and Russia in it. US doesn't want India to do anything with Russia now. They don't want India to do anything with Iran. So how can India sail on two boats despite all our jingoism and chest thumping that we might do and talk about what Mr. Jaishankar may have done? But this is a different reality altogether, and I don't know how it is going to play out once the elections are over.
So the primary concern that we have now, Mr. Kapoor, you're saying is how we're going to manage, balancing our friendship with the US and our old and tied and trusted ties with Russia. But the main driver for this, you don't believe, is Iran itself trying to find primacy in the Middle East for itself as one of the top Islamic leaders. Islamic countries.
I think it is going to get trickier as we go. If you look at the composition of the IMAC, you have India, Middle East, you have Saudi Arabia, you have UAE, you have Jordan, you have Israel. And as Iranians have been accusing India also, that it's Europe and the Middle East which is dragging India into this embrace. They don't want India to be part of the Central Asia, Iran, Russia, a compact which is emerging primarily through the BRICS or Shanghai Cooperation. They want India to remain in that direction. So if that is how it is all playing out, I don't know whether India can play with both the players. I mean, can they do business with the BRICS countries and with Russia, with Iran, with China? I don't think it is possible anymore because US has become very aggressive on such matters. They want India to, stay the course with them, do business with them, and to jettison whatever maybe our old ties or our traditional relationship with the other countries. So in these circumstances, it'll be a big challenge. India has tried to maintain certain amount of strategic autonomy, but if you remember, India did not violate the US when it came to the sanctions on oil. We stopped buying oil from Iran altogether post 2018,
That's right.
and that
Yeah,
continued for quite a while. We haven't even bought a pint of oil from Iran after that, despite Iran saying that why don't you do it? The Chinese do it all the time. So we have to see
yeah.
how it plays out.
Yeah. So if I can move on to Vice Admiral uh, Sinha. Vice Admiral, could you tell us whether you think India has made the right decision? Because given, as Mr. Kapoor has also said, given the time, the current, the mess in the Middle East, where Iran is and its proxies are, sort of ranged against the America and its allies, particularly Israel, and it is a huge commitment on India's part to take on injecting 120 million into the port's development to equip the port, plus an additional 250 million dollar credit window for infrastructure. So the total value of the project is not to be sneezed at. It's 370 million dollars, plus the MEA is committing to another 100 crore rupees. So it's also India's first contract, I believe, to manage a foreign port, an actual, although I believe there are three, four, five others that they're also looking at. So, what do you see as the advantages, Admiral Sinha, on India going for this Chabahar move?
Well, thank you, Nina, for getting me on your show. I always enjoyed. It's pleasure
No,
to
yeah,
that this is not a new project.
yes,
The first time that it ever came into discussion was year 2003,
yeah.
which was the MOU signed between the two chiefs of naval staff of India
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
Iran. And it was conceived at that time. For 9 years, nothing much happened because of the turmoil in Iran and its sanction and nuclear weapon, etc. Now, the present agreement, which has been signed for 10 years, it is not something out of the blue. We had this contract agreement going every year. The validity was just 1 year. And therefore, it was felt that it is not doing good to anybody unless we have a long-term agreement. And this 10-year agreement has been signed, number one. Secondly, Chabahar port was kept out of the ambit of CATSA because it was
Mm-hmm.
supposed to deliver the relief material and other business to Afghanistan, which will happen.
That's right.
Is passing quite close to Zaranj, and Zarang Dilaram road highway we have made, and that will happen. Slowly, it will happen. But now it will get extended right through Masad and get into the Turkmenistan for a little while, and Azerbaijan and Russia, and then European landmass. So it will feed into the INSTC. Now, not doing business with Russia or Iran, uh,
Mm-hmm.
our policy has been that our policies are based on what suits India. And
Yeah,
it is not based on what will suit United States of America or anybody else. It suits us because it will give us access to Eurasian market, to Central Asia, in addition to Afghanistan. And therefore, if the US gets upset, well, US is supposed to get upset. If US gets threatens you of Katsa, well, that is what they're supposed to do.
yeah,
So the point is now that our foreign policy, our foreign minister, external affairs minister, well, I'm sure he will have a word with their secretary of state and he will explain. Because as you rightly said, Sanjay also mentioned that, the other project of Saudi Arabia and Israel and UAE has gone into a bit of,
IMAC.
gone into doldrums. Therefore, we cannot keep waiting for that to sort out, and we need to have an alternate route which already is existing. We just have to activate it. So
Oh,
if
you mean to say that INSTC is actually, most of it is in place already?
of course there have been trials done, 22,000 tons of store has been moved, the timing has been
That's
done.
right.
There has been a
That's right.
customs and excise officers of all these countries who have come together, they have worked out an SOP. It is in existence. It has to be activated. Mind you, INSTC is also part of the Asgabad Declaration, right? At that point in
Mm-hmm.
time,
Mm-hmm.
India was not a member. But
Uh-huh.
thereafter, they saw that there is a benefit. And, by opening Chabahar, it is quite possible to take this INSTC road or railway line right up to Masad. And some $500 million was sanctioned during Madam Sushma Swaraj's time. And lot
Mm-hmm.
of rolling stock was actually landed in Chabahar, and I'm sure that some of it is in process. So I think that just because some US is getting upset, US got upset for our S-400 also. US got upset for our buying oil from Russia, and I believe that US is going to lift the sanction of oil selling by Russia. It's happening. It's going to happen because the end product is actually going to Europe.
That's
Okay.
right.
After refining, we are selling it to Europe. So European countries are saying, hey, come on, don't do this. Otherwise, tomorrow Indians will turn around and say, how come your allies are buying and you're not putting any sanction on them? So I think this is a double-edged sword, and America has to play. America's problem is not that. America's problem is that it is actually very worried that China, Russia combined, they will displace them from the top end. We don't have any competition with anybody, not even China. Not even China that we have any competition. Fine, China is China. We have only our interest in mind. All foreign policy now based what suits India. If you get upset, you get upset. I mean, we just too bad.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that
That's
it's
changed.
just the right time, and I think that the India's contribution otherwise to meet the strategic goals of States of America are too precious to let India go away from any other alliance or
That's very
any
interesting.
corporate mega. It will not. Because main thing is what? The
Yeah.
main problem is they have declared in their national security strategy that their biggest threat is China,
Yes.
who is trying to economically displace, which it will very soon. But delay progress of China, but you can't deny.
Yeah. Yeah.
They've gone quite ahead. So what will happen now? You can delay it by creating hurdles. And India is an important factor.
Yeah. Absolutely. So before I come
Like
to you,
the
Mr.
Europeans,
Basin, I just want to go back to Mr. Kapoor for a minute before he actually exits the
sorry,
program. Do, the, I just want to ask Mr. Kapoor one question. Don't you think that, I mean, do you believe that the Russia-China connect is also something that could be of great worry to the US? Because and to India, how does India look at it? Because Putin's first visit after he became, he won, was re-elected, was to China. So shouldn't that be
I,
a source
I
of worry for us?
I entirely agree with you. This is a very significant visit that President Putin of Russia made to Beijing, and the 8,000 word agreement that has been signed between the two of them is like
Yes.
just simply amazing in certain ways, because it covers the entire ambit of relationship between the two countries and more. And I'm sure this must be watched very closely by Russia, by United States of America, and they would be trying to put all the ducks in a row and trying to see who all are on their side, who's not, and what are the implications of when China and Russia come together. It is a very formidable combination. And I'm sure they would not like India to also go with them whichever way they can, because BRICS really worries them because of the de-dollarization that is built into this entire compact. And if if US has no freedom to print dollars, what is US after all? So I'm sure this
Yeah.
would cause a great amount of anxiety when it comes to Washington. And this agreement has the makings of something far more formidable than it is made out to be. And US will be watching it very closely. India too has to do it as soon as the elections are over and we get down to the business of sorting out our uh, foreign policy.
Hmm. Thank you very much, Mr. Kapoor, for joining us. Mr.
Thank you.
Basin, if I could
Thank
come
you
to
very much.
you, I believe that there is more to this Iran, India bonhomie than meets the eye. I mean, there is a little bit of a worry that President Ibrahim Raisi was in Pakistan a few weeks ago. So, how did the idea of India running a foreign port like Chabahar even arise? I mean, you've been there, and the other thing that fascinates me is Iran's acceptance of India, given, India's closeness to, growing closeness to the US. I mean, even though India faced sanctions, the US sanctions in 2018, and India bought no oil at all from Iran, what do the Iranians hope to gain from our investment in Chabahar?
See, firstly, this is an operational. We have to understand that our external affairs minister visited Iran, and this is not the first time this 10-year agreement is being announced. This one,
Yeah,
if you
he
remember,
said that, yes.
the reaction of the US when the external affairs minister visited Iran and announced this agreement, which actually was in discussion from earlier. So it is nothing new, and we should not read into US's reaction too much. And as the other speaker said, today the larger geopolitical realities is unraveling. Every country is it's so the US. Let's put it, the US West centric hold is drastically being challenged, to say that. And the global South, the way the Iranians look at South Asia and in their look east approach is basically to increase trade routes and access and be the crossroads between because they're in the middle of Eurasia and India is in the middle of South Asia. So they see great long-term strategic relevance on both on economic and geopolitical terms. Okay. As far as the sanctions are concerned, as Admiral Shekhar Sinha mentioned, the US is also realizing that the utility of the sanctions has been overplayed and they are not being able to achieve. Actually, it is, as he mentioned, and you mentioned Putin's visit to China, is that it is drawing their so-called adversaries closer and they are finding ways to go around the sanctions. So they are sort of, counterproductive beyond the point. And the challenge to the dollar, which is a core part of US geoeconomics or strategy, because that's how they control the world. As far as Iran is concerned, they are trying to play Chabahar very importantly, although it's been discussion for a long time, and the sanctions have impeded progress.
What is Iran going to get out of this?
So Iran gains geostrategically. That area called the Makran area is impoverished, so the area benefits from the investments there. Iran earns tens of billions of dollars in the potential. We can say when it will happen, but the potential of it being at the cross, using it as a trade route, is immense. And it reduces the dependence, of course, on the current area of conflict, which is the Suez and Red Sea. So it greatly enhances. Secondly, as we know, the sanctions, we are not buying oil from Iran, but Iran is the third largest reserve of oil and largest reserve of gas in the world. And India is the third largest importer of gas in the world. So, eventually we have not only in trades in terms of connecting South, as their ambassador recently gave an interview, is connecting Southeast Asia with Eurasia and beyond. It's also, putting its strategic position and importance. And as Admiral Sinha mentioned, that not only India, we also have to look at this in one other context, because I joined late, so I don't know whether speakers mentioned it. Iran is even BRI and CPEC. The Chinese have not made any major investments in Iran. If you compare,
that's what I was coming to. The fact that the
if
Chinese haven't.
if you look at their investments in Saudi are close to $52 billion. Their investments, which are again also impeded because of US sanctions. And that was the reason why when Xi Jinping had that big conference a couple of years back, if you remember, in Saudi, when he invited all the GCC countries, and right after that, that rapprochement was, sort of brought together between US and Iran, because naturally Iran got upset with the importance given to the Arabs. So coming back to Chabahar, it is seen from their angle to basically their to counter their tense relationship with the Middle East and the US. For India, it's of course bypassing Pakistan and having access to Central Asia, and for our energy security, it is very important because we are a growing economy, and we have to grow our economy and exports. Indian exports have reaching about $1 trillion. So the point is, it is after the 90s, that's why Chabahar came into prominence. Till we were a closed economy, we did not. If you look at the history of Chabahar, it was first getting mentioned. I'm not going in the historical past, but in the recent history, in the 1990s during Narasimha Rao's government.
Narasimha Rao's government, yes.
And then in Prime Minister Vajpayee's government, they started discussing it, but then because of the US sanctions, they had to sort of go back. And then after the JCPOA was signed again, it gathered traction. And as far as the carve out is concerned, it was given at that time for circumstances and that reason. But the Iranians and us see a larger role. Also, with Admiral Sinha has probably mentioned, Bandar Abbas is not a deep sea port. Chabahar is in the Sea of Oman, and it's an oceanic port. So it has the potential of a deep sea port, which is a huge advantage for Iran. Currently, Iran cannot take vessels of more than 100,000 tons. So they are dependent on the UAE. Now, we can also have a discussion that if Chabahar sees what its potential is, so it challenges UAE's
UAE, exactly.
UAE's position also, but that is another discussion.
No, that's very interesting. Admiral Sunal, I can come back to you. Chabahar port, you say, as Sam says, is a deep sea port. But the point is, it also means us getting closer to a country that is seen as the so-called villain in the Middle East, because it does support proxies. I mean, the it's not just the Houthis who are holding the Red Sea to ransom. Now you have the Hezbollah in Lebanon, which has stepped up the attacks on Israel. And when we've befriended Israel in a very very open manner, while also trying to keep our sort of with the Arab world ties with the Arab world. Where does it leave us? Where does it leave India? Because I mean, this is as tricky as handling the US versus Russia game. In fact, it's trickier, I think.
Well, I'll make just 2, 3 important points. Number one, Iran is our civilizational friend. This is nothing new. We have had very good equation with both the Shia world of Iran and also the Sunni world in Saudi Arabia, and in this present tenure of the Prime Minister Modi, also with UAE. So I think that, from that part, both Iran understand when we deal with the UAE, and Saudi also understands when we deal with Iran. We're not buying any oil from them. And this, this route is only passing through Iran. And Iran is, if Iran gets any, because of the route cost, etc., then that's not something which is a fat lot, number one. Secondly, if India remains absent from all this, you got the Belt and Road Initiative running right parallel to, somewhere near Moscow, somewhere near Russia.
Yeah.
And therefore, leaving this also void, we will only encourage China to occupy that space and get his friendship much deeper with Iran. Now, this is one chance that the US will see that the Iranians, are having some kind of benefit of giving this land for route of these, the railway line or the road, etc. And it does not fall onto Chinese lap. Absolutely bandwagon. And they've been trying very hard. If you know that, they also sort of steered the friendship between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And therefore, it is a clear indication that China wants to jump into the West Asian, the scenario of the geopolitics. So this is something which the US would like to avoid. They won't like the Iranians to get any upper hand. Now, unfortunately for the US, that it doesn't have very much to deal with the Iranians. In fact, they should be fortunate that through India, they can achieve that aim. India is not going to leave.
That's a superb point. Yes.
The US, in fact, to be very honest, the first time when the Chabahar first agreement was signed the MOU was signed between the two ministers was 2013. I was in Bombay at that time. And our request to the US, why it was let off. Our request to the US was that, don't worry, in the long run, this might become your route as well to get your land access to Afghanistan and the Central Asia, which they bought that idea at that time. Nothing has changed. INSTC is not new. You can ask, Sam is here. I don't know, in years of Lord 2014-15, we were attending one seminar in, I think it was in Mazar-e-Sharif or Herat, and I'd given a presentation that this is going to open the door for Afghanistan and the Central Asian Republic. It was intended to do that, and it will do that. In fact, if it is passing very close to the border between Iran and Afghanistan. I know there's a Taliban government. There's a fair amount of dealing going on right now. From Zelans to Dilaram Highway, it has been built by the border road. And that is very much...
Is it connected to Zahedan?
Yeah.
So Zaidan, basically the rail link is not there. So it is connected, but they need a rail link up to Milak, which is the border on as Admiral
True.
Saab mentioned.
Mhm.
True.
Yeah, because for transporting bulk cargo, you need rail lines. You can't do it on road. If
True.
if you need more capacity of movement of goods, you have to link it to rail.
True. And that is why the Indian government actually earmarked $500 million and offloaded a lot of rolling stock of railways into Chabahar.
I see.
I'm sure some work must have been done. So I think it is while technically the US may be very upset about it, but I think they should be rest assured that it is not going to be any non-beneficial to them strategically in the long run. You never know. If they say that, okay, China is our main adversary, then many people in America are suggesting to the administration that you should make friends with Russia.
Hmm.
You take off these too many, sanctions which you have put. And as I mentioned, I've also heard that it is quite possible that buying Russian oil, that sanction is likely to be removed.
That's a very good point, actually.
Yeah.
No, I will add there, even for Iran's policy options, you have to look at it. When the Obama administration and actually Jack Sullivan negotiated the JCPOA, who's now the National Security Advisor, and what
Yeah.
Sinha mentioned, Chabahar that time was signed when the sanctions were removed under the Obama
Hmm.
administration. It was in 18 when Trump came back and reimposed the sanctions that the carve out had to be, put in place. But when the
So
sanctions,
basically, the carve out that you guys are talking about is basically because they were going to do humanitarian, sort of
yeah, because
shipments
when
to Afghanistan.
Obama resigned it on JCPOA and reimposed sanctions on Iran, and that is where India had actually played a role. And that time it was also to do with the US. The Taliban deal discussion started in Qatar. So it was during that time that the US, as Admiral Sinha said, was informed that this is to their advantage. And also you have to look at what he mentioned in China. So objectively look at it. Would Iran want to be dependent on China? No, they would rather have a open trade and allow their export to go and still deal with the US. If the US does not impose sanctions, Iran gets to benefit. So
So
all these
basically,
sanctions,
Iran
like
just
I said, are
played a.
actually counterproductive and did, as Admiral Sinha also said, have not achieved their purpose and is actually is causing US more harm than benefit.
Mm, mm, mm. But Jaishankar has been pretty, I mean, it's not very bold. I mean, the kind of statements that he's made. He said, if it's between me and Iran, it's between me and Iran.
No, no. So
And
I'll add Jaishankar. I was at a meeting yesterday. Jaishankar had said when he was asked when he had gone there and that he gave an indication that this has been cleared at the highest level. What it means is the US knew. So right now, as I read an article in Al Jazeera also, which was published today on this, even the
uh-huh.
Western media is playing it down. They are not raising the alarm bells on this. Although the State Department of State spokesman reacted to it when he was asked by the media, but so he had to naturally give, and especially in the current circumstances prevailing in the Gulf and the sensitivities around, what is happening in the US. So, and in this election in the US, so they have to be careful of what they say vis-a-vis Iran because of the situation in Israel. But that said,
That's right.
strategically, it will not go anywhere beyond that because that
So you're
policy of.
basically saying that the US was in the loop,
Yeah, it was
so to
because
speak.
that's what I said. When Minister Jaishankar went and announced this earlier this year, there was no reaction from the US, or this kind of reaction was not there. And at
No,
that
but
time,
in January 2024,
yeah, yeah,
was it
yeah,
as plain as we see today that there would be a transformation of an annual agreement to a 10-year agreement?
yeah, because this 10-year contract has been discussed. I was reading was actually most of it was signed. It was not operationalized.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
And also, I'll explain these two components, because technically the carve out relates to investments in Chabahar, does not relate to other infrastructure development outside the port. So you have to put it in two components. Within the port, you have exemptions from the sanctions. Outside the port, we are going around That is not covered under the carve out. So we are using a credit line to fund that because that is not technically that is not
Oh,
covered under the carve out. So that's why there are these two components.
Yeah, I just
oh,
like to
that's,
add to what Sam said. Sam is absolutely
yeah.
right. He's been operating in that area for many, many years. In fact, we ask him so many questions on,
How
getting
many terminals does he have in his possession, I wonder?
that you can have a separate meeting with him now. Nina, I'll tell you very important. What he made a very good point. That strategically it will not be right for the US not to say those things. In fact, I would say the repercussion of US not making a statement, you know, condemning India will have
Hmm.
more strategic disadvantage to US than what it is happening now. Now at least they've just got
Hmm.
away. Yes, we don't even leave our own close friends. I'll give you an example. One of their destroyers passed very close to Lakshadweep Island, right? The US
Hmm.
Navy. Now that destroyer was coming from South China Sea and it has done the transit through the Taiwan Strait. And
Uh-huh.
when the Chinese started making noise, they said, sorry, in our book, right of innocent passage exists for a warship even within the territorial water, which is 12 nautical miles. Okay. But this is one area, this is one law which China and India are on the same page. China and India say that inside the territorial water, warships do not have permission to right of innocent passage. So similarly, in Lakshadweep, the US ship, they actually broke our law.
Oh.
And they from
Did
there,
we react?
they are making an,
Yeah, there was a reaction from India.
yeah,
Strong.
they're taking the whole world. They're telling the whole
Hmm.
world that, we have told India also, which is our friend. So for us,
Hmm.
following a rule is across the board. That's precisely what they're doing here. If they don't make a statement, then there will be more people saying that you've made exemption to so and so. What kind of world power you are? So I think that
Hmm.
it is right for them to make this noise. But my own belief is that it's not going to go beyond that. And I think Sam has also said something to a very similar extent. So I think that we should not see too much. What will happen? I don't know what US will do beyond this. You know, CATSA exemption you have given once. We are not breaking those things. We already had yearly agreement which is going on. And as Sam
Yeah,
said, that we are only $120 million is only for development of infrastructure on the jetty. You require heavy
that's
duty
right.
cranes, you require forklifts, you require this packing, you require platforms to load them. And thereafter, the credit line, whichever way Iran uses, it is up to them and they know what they're going to use it for. To take the
Oh,
railway, yeah. Rolling stock is already lying, Nina. It is lying inside
yeah,
the Iranian territory. And
yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's only,
But
I'll
to
tell you
come
what
back to
happened.
Afghanistan,
Sorry?
to come back to the importance of Afghanistan
Yeah. Yep.
right now Afghanistan is very low on the radar where the US is concerned. So I
Yeah.
mean that carve out clause was basically because we were allowed to send goods to through Chabahar into Afghanistan. Is that still a big deal? I mean,
No, it will happen. In fact, right now, only that can happen because the rest of the route is a lot of things to be done.
ah,
No, so, Nina,
yeah.
I'll answer that for you. So you have to
But is it
understand
enough?
it's a
Yeah.
political compulsion to justify that carve out in that or under those circumstances. We use
Yes.
the situation and like I said, there were a lot of moving parts there. The JCPOA had been resigned, but the
Hmm?
Taliban deal was on, and India was
Yeah.
actually pushed that in.
Okay.
But the US, in its own domestic politics, had to use the Afghanistan excuse to give the carve out. They of course
Yeah.
look it as other utility. You can't to a port say that okay, every box you get will only go here. How will you restrict a port from transiting goods elsewhere?
So our goods were going elsewhere. Is that what you're implying?
Yeah, it is right now. If you look at the statistics, there's hardly any trade movement with Afghanistan. Most of the goods going to Chabahar are actually going to Iran.
Hmm. Hmm.
See, that was
And
used in a political context to get the carve out.
yeah. Yeah,
So, and it
exactly,
was
exactly.
explained in the context of Afghanistan, because that time Afghanistan was, you know, that deal was, the most important thing for the US to withdraw its troops.
Correct.
You have to understand, in their political context domestically, they will give, justified saying, okay, we are withdrawing and we need these things to take place before we can safely get our troops out. And this is what India
Yeah.
wants. But as Admiral Sinha
So
said, they also understand that, without saying it, that this is a counter, and this is what Iran is also saying, this is a counter to the BRI. Because if you look at the BRI, the Chinese have actually left Iran out of, if you look at the BRI routing, they have
yes,
not.
yes, that's exactly it.
Yeah. So Iran
You're
realizes
right.
that.
Yeah, so we have copycatted the BRI. I mean, this is basically India's
No, not
maritime
complicated a
surveillance.
BRI, sorry. So there is another distinction between the BRI. BRI is a debt trap. This is not. If you look at the
Yes,
economic
yes,
model,
yes,
because
that's
here
true.
you are
That's
building,
true.
so you have connectivity in terms of rail transport. BRI is a mostly new conceived concept, because most of the infrastructure is new. Here you're basically using a deep sea port and connecting the missing part, which will allow access. So its economic model is no comparison to BRI.
That's a very interesting point. Admiral, would you like to talk to us about the fact that we have now circumvented and gone around Karachi and Gwadar? Are they, I mean, will they no longer be I mean, will they lose their relevance, Karachi and Gwadar?
You see, that Pakistan has blockaded us. If you see with Afghanistan's trade, of course they have. We know the tense. That's another discussion. Tense relationships with the Taliban and the TTP and all, and disruption and closing down of Turkham and other borders. But still, they allow Afghan goods to come to India, and they allowed it all the while. Except for the Tata buses, if you remember, they did not allow us to. We had to, while the Ghani government was, the previous administration was
Yeah.
there, we had to send food aid, and we had used Chabahar to send it. Why? Because they had not allowed us to even send food aid, and they had made the excuse that the wheat is contaminated. And before we sent that consignment through Chabahar, we had sent earlier World Food. We had to send, make biscuits and send it, because we had to send it by air, because the World Food Program said that we will not transport it. You have to deliver it to Afghanistan.
Oh,
So they
so
didn't
then
even, except for the
Pakistan.
Tata buses, they have not allowed
Yeah.
anything to go the other way around. Means from India to, because they have a transit trade treaty with Afghanistan.
So, Admiral Sinha, can we come back to you? Can we expect some kind of blowback from China? I mean, what could they do to counter us? Because I'm sure they're very unhappy with the fact that we've arrived at this deal with Iran finally, and that that we found a way to counter and basically see to it that that Pakistan's no longer going to be kind of a block.
Nina, can I just say one point? This is nothing
Yeah,
new.
sure.
It is being
Yeah.
covered by news, but this port, as China is aware, this port and investment is being under discussion for the last 20 years almost. So it is
But
nothing.
China, Sam, has not been as active in the region. I mean, it's only in the last 2-3 years
Yeah,
that they've
but
sort of.
since we signed the deal in 2016 when PM Modi visited, he was the first prime minister to visit Iran in 20 years. And it was a trilateral sign between India, Afghanistan, and Iran. And China's BRI
I agree.
project started in 2014-15. It has just celebrated its 10-year anniversary.
That's right.
The
Admiral, would
Chabahar,
you like to comment?
Yeah. You see, is absolutely right that the BRI is a newborn baby. INSTC and Chabahar is much older. Therefore,
Mm.
to assume that it is counter to BRI, I don't agree. In fact, the BRI was
Ah.
created to counter the INSTC, to be very honest, because
Oh, that's very
INSTC,
interesting.
yeah, INSTC was not taking place, and the Chinese wanted a European market, so they went wrong. As far as relevance of Pakistan is concerned, I mean this act is not the only act by which Pakistan has become irrelevant. When was Pakistan relevant in the last 5-6 years? Yeah, tell me. even economically, you see even strategically, you see even on the border, is Pakistan relevant? It's not relevant. I attended one bilateral discussion in Colombo recently, and there the problem was the Pakistanis were saying that we are quite shocked that Pakistan is not a matter of any political speech while the election is going on. During the elections, the politicians always made Pakistan an issue and then asked for votes because they had to beat. So Pakistan is not an issue. So later on, when they finished talking and crying, then from our side, we mentioned that, look, to be very honest, Pakistan is irrelevant. They were quite shocked to hear this from even track two people. We are not government. We are, just track two. So were they.
That's true.
So
That's true.
Pakistan is
So
really
I'll,
basically,
not relevant. Our focus,
we've
Nina,
outmaneuvered
our
Pakistan
focus
with
is
war.
on
I will,
China. Nina, our focus is on China. And so is we are continuously telling the US that you should focus on China. Off late, they have put some more sanction. Let's not forget that it is also election year of president in the US. And
That's
therefore,
right.
domestically, if the administration does not at least warn countries as per the existing act, they will be seen in very poor light. And Mr. Trump will use this as a handle that, you have been very soft to India because you didn't even warn him. So, these are all, to be very honest, there are a lot of political and strategic, domestic compulsion, external compulsion. This will happen. This will happen. And if the embargo on Russian oil is going to be lifted, which I heard, I don't know how far it is gone. If that happens, then obviously the Americans have realized that, doing oil trade with Russia, there's nothing wrong because they're also feeding the whole European Union. Entire Europe is
Hmm.
buying finished product from Indian refineries. The crude
Admiral,
is
but isn't there also a contradiction in terms, in the sense that, here we have Iran's proxies, the Houthis, prowling along the Red Sea, and we have India's navy. I mean, has done such a stellar job, also, patrolling the Indian Ocean and the Gulf and so on and so forth. Do you see a potential clash there between the
no.
Indian Navy and the Houthis?
No, not at all. In fact, that is exactly why the external affairs minister went to Iran. And you see, there has been no attack on any Indian ship or Indian flagship, not even one. Main
in
request was
fact,
that
it is the
kindly tell
opposite.
them not to attack, any Indian ship. And I think, see, I'll tell you, the point is, this is not something new that Houthi has come up now today. Hezbollah is, no, nothing. All these proxies have been there for ages.
They
And the
have.
main thing was to oppose, Israeli sort of action. Whereas Houthis now, they are saying that because Israelis are hitting Hamas, and therefore we must take a revenge on the commercial ships of US and Israel. But
Mm,
unfortunately, recognition at sea is not very easy. They have come and hammered some
mm.
other ships also. So I think there has been slight reduction in that. And it will happen. Iran knows this is the first time that Iran has openly attacked some positions in Israel. So it is between Israel and what has happened. It's not that Prime Minister Modi or REM is inactive. On their own, in their own way, they have been telling these people to start talking. During the Ramadan period, request was made that, don't attack, they've got festival. So it was, of course, towards the end, the Rafah attack went on for 3, 4 days, but initially it was stopped. And we are the ones who are giving aid to Hamas. And mind you, Hamas has now become friendly to Hezbollah, but they're actually a Sunni group. But
That's true.
Iran is still sort of supporting them. It all depends because, that the main issue for them is Israel. And America is the closest ally of Israel. So, these are all very complex picture of the West Asia, which Sam also mentioned, is very complex. So, therefore, as you said, is it going to be difficult to steer? I think that, Prime Minister Modi and External Affairs Minister have been walking a tightrope for quite some time now, and manner in which the geopolitics is turning out, the international given order is under threat. They also know that if they leave China, then China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, they will all become together, and you will have this axis actually become superior and form itself into alliance. at least by India being there and Iran being segregated for the time being, that's not going to happen. Okay. So I think that, there are bigger picture in this, and I think that they will walk a very tightrope. I know that. But I think they're all capable of doing it.
Okay,
I will
Sam,
just
if I can bring you in
I will just
on the
add there.
Taliban.
In fact, on the contrary, we need, like you, as Admiral Sinha mentioned, we actually need to engage Iran more to tackle the. There is a ship which has been recently taken, and we are, there we have Indian crew on there. So
Yeah.
our relationship, it works on the other, contrary to that, it helps us keep a closer engagement with Iran to, address these issues. And to your other point of which Admiral Sinha mentioned, it is basically the relevance of Pakistan basically was there because of the US. And when the US exited and they made the deal with the Taliban, now Pakistan's utility and relevance to the US is largely diminished.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that actually, because the Taliban are no longer the primary focus of the US in that region, and neither is Pakistan for some reason. But I was also going to ask about the relevance of Afghanistan and the connect. So, do you think that we do enough in the sense? Given the fact that we have a relationship now with the Taliban regime, recognized or not recognized by the world, I mean, are we blind to the fact that China is mining lithium reserves? It's rare earths. Why is it that we haven't stepped in and
See,
and taken that?
I'll tell you something.
Move?
Don't go by what you see in the media. I don't think the US will allow China to get a free ride in Afghanistan. And contrary to what is perceived, US is, which is reported in the public domain, US is giving $40 to $80 million to the Taliban. This is public information, which is
Exactly.
So they are fully engaged. Also understand that the US signed the deal. Ambassador Khalilzad, as a special representative of the Trump administration, signed a deal. So that gives Taliban legitimacy, whether we like it or not. When
In
you
Washington.
recognize, if you remember when the Korean Jung came to Singapore, and the Western media was saying by Trump, by meeting him, is giving him legitimacy. So please understand, Trump actually spoke to Mullah Brother, and if you remember, Trump actually went way ahead without realizing and said the deal should be signed in Camp David, and then they realized that you're getting people who are involved in 9/11 to come on US soil and sign a deal. How it would how would that sort of be perceived by the American public, and they had to go back on that. So I think the Taliban de facto, everyone engages with them, and of course there is a gender issue and other issues, but point is, for now it will continue like that, because the Russians are, if you remember, even during the talks with the Taliban, they were engaging not only in Qatar, but they were even going to China, to Russia, and to Iran. So whatever the deal is signed, as consensus has been created with other powers, and because China, Russia, and Iran's main contention was the presence of US forces there, which is no longer there. So they don't see a threat. But of course, we can have another discussion. There are terrorist groups there, like the ISKP and all, which are, and the TTP for Pakistan are causing problems. But so for now, I think the Taliban, right? As far as India's engagement is there, we are engaging to what is possible. We cannot, under circumstances, we have to increase our thing gradually. But I don't see because it is not a recognized regime, and so how do you recognize? I was giving an example to someone that if you look at the Afghan cricket team, they're still paying an the ICC with which no longer exists, but the Taliban don't object to it.
No, good team. So my question basically now, with India taking on this flagship project, India is also placing a long overdue emphasis on its own land and sea trade routes. It's creating a supply chain. It's emphasizing its own energy security. And as I said to you, Admiral Sinha, it's got an amped up sort of naval presence in West Asia. So I think we look as if we're putting our own interests first, and basically by carving our own relationship with Russia and safeguarding our relationship now with Iran. It's like a vindication, I think, of the fact that, we are a rising power in our neighborhood. But, will we get caught in the middle? Will we pay a heavy price? I mean, if both of you can give concluding remarks on whether we are stepping a little out of our comfort zone, not little, quite a bit out of our comfort zone, by doing this.
The geopolitics is a very dynamic thing. And what you did yesterday, it may not be relevant today. It may not be relevant day after tomorrow. So therefore, to assume that, we had a sanction of the US when we did the Pokhran test. What happened? It made us more independent. So possibly, if it happens, we'll find ways to do it. And that is one of the reasons why we are in we are friendly to Russia. We are friendly to US. We are friendly to Iran. We are friendly to Saudi. When it was said as 400 deal, when American press and American senators and people in the House, they started telling that how have you permitted, why aren't they buying the Indian weapon systems? Anthony Blinken has gone on record to make a statement that, look, we never gave them anything. We didn't sell it to them. They came to us. So now they are only got legacy items and it can't be thrown away overnight. Slowly the change will come, and we also have to think that these are the legacy items, and it will remain there till such time it runs out of life. And already as far as the defense deals are concerned, you see in terms of money, last 6, 7, 8 years, it has been much more. There are more American weapon systems than China, the Russian system. There are no new systems have been inducted. These are all the legacy and logistic support of the old. S-400 is a very old deal. It's just that one of them came and other one didn't come. So I think that, we must not see this case in isolation. And the geopolitics and the bigger picture we must take, and it will also be driven by the domestic compulsions. For example, also in India, the elections are going on at the moment. And, though it doesn't have any impact because it doesn't get impacted by the external. But the fact remains that the government takes bold actions. That thought will again be into people's mind, those who understand all this. That in spite of all the threat of Gatsa, etc., the government would have weighed all this. They wouldn't
That's
have,
right.
yeah, they wouldn't have, it's okay for us to discuss on a sort of track 2 type discussion. I'm sure that the government, the Ministry of External Affairs and the advisors and economic advisor, they would have seen, okay, in case what happens if some sanction comes, then what will happen? Nothing will happen.
But we are taking a much tougher line on China than we used to.
That's
I mean,
true.
2 days running now, Mr. Jaishankar has taken a very tough line on China.
Exactly. In fact, he has mentioned only yesterday that, while we have, put sanction on, doing any deal with, but somebody said, the trade is increasing. He said, because we don't have any security overlay on the businessmen, what business they're doing. Other countries import it.
Yeah.
So unless we have that, you will not be able to stop that. In fact, it is high time that our business houses began to look at Chinese items, not only from the cost benefit, but also the security overlay, which actually lies inside. If they do, it will be good for India. It may be expensive initially, but I think it will give encouragement to Indian industry to give the items which they require, which they're buying from China. So I think that, keeping the Chinese away should be the US aim. And in that context, I think India is doing a lot of heavy lifting, what the US would have done otherwise.
Thank you. Sam, concluding remarks?
So I think as far as Chabahar is concerned, Admiral Sinha mentioned, and you sort of hinted at that the US looks at India-Iran relationship, as as a backdoor or diplomacy. But Iran also
Yeah.
views it the same way. You have to look at it that way. Iran also knows he's playing on the India-US relationship, and if they were doing this without India or something else in the picture, they would not risk this. So they're also aware of the relevance of India to the US, and so it is for both. So I think right now, uh, 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 I don't see, because the US is in an election year. So as you know that JCPOA was signed by the Democratic administration under Obama, and it was decided by Trump. But Trump gave the carve out. So right now there is all speculation of Trump coming back to the White House. So we will see how the US policy plays out, because also you have to see is it that carve out. Another thing which I want to mention, I'm not an expert on the legislation, because the carve out is from a legislation. So it gives the authority to the US president of how he plays it, because the line it mentions is that whatever is done should be done in US national interest. But it is an as far as I understand it, it's an executive power with the president of interpreting and seeing how it is. So it's out of the purview, means the exemption has already been given. So the US president and White House can take a call. But considering all these geopolitical complexities, I don't see them, besides lip service, going beyond that.
Thank you. So, as India steps into the Middle East in this most unexpected manner, we will have to wait and see whether it has the wherewithal to navigate these treacherous waters in the Persian Gulf. Thank you, Admiral Sinha. Thank you, Mr. Basil. And thank you, Mr. Kapoor, for taking part in this show. Thank you, viewers. Do click on the New Indian Express web link and Global Express and share and retweet the show. Thank you very much.